Good morning, everyone. Thanks God for another day and another year He has given us. Um, Today, in times of danger, I found beneficial to meditate in the book of Revelation, as this book was intended um, to provide consolation, hope, and faith to Christians who suffer. So, our lecture will be today based on Revelation chapter 13. I have asked Brother Al to help me read some of this portion from 11 to 18. So I'm going to start reading from verse 1 to verse 10. Um, this passage, before I read it, it's going to talk about the two beasts, a dragon, and some important details that we're about to meditate. So verse 1 says, "The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. He had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on his horns, and on his head and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshiped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it?" The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power, it was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. All those names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who has slain from the creation of the world. Whoever has ears, let them hear. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. The 11th.
Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he was speaking as a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. And he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. And he does great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which were given to him to do in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. And it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak, and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And he causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the free man and the slave, that they be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, and that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark, even the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, and his number is 666.
Thank you, Al. You may be wondering why I came up with this sounds like complicated chapter to understand, but it isn't too complicated. You'll see. Um, well, what really motivated me is I've been studying for the last 2 weeks about this, but also I have found a way to encourage my family and other Christians in Nicaragua. They also feel fearful right now, more fearful about things that are happening there. And I think this is very, very appropriate. Whenever you feel in danger, maybe Revelation is a good book to read and to meditate. Here's a few questions to help us discern this chapter. There are so many details, I won't be able to cover all of them, but just the basics. So, why has the book of Revelation produced fear in many believers instead of peace? Which is true. Many people they think about Revelation and they get into panic. The question is why? But that's not the reason. The book of Revelation is there to give us peace, no panic. Was Revelation written to create confusion or to strengthen the faith of the church? Yes, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to read the book of Revelation. Now, is biblical symbolism the same as superstition? Unfortunately, there's a lot of superstition about certain chapters or overall of the book of Revelation. But the answer is no. Biblical symbolism is not the same as superstition. Now, when governments become powerful, unjust, or oppressive, sometimes we wonder, where is God? Does God see the suffering of the innocent, especially his children? Who truly governs history? Now, if we want to understand chapter 13, first, it's important to define what the word revelation means. So the word revelation means to unveil, not to hide. If we read the chapter 1 of say Revelation verse 1, only that, we can find there a definition that is um, very simple, but it's necessary to read it. To give me just a moment. 1:1, the revelation from Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants what must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who testified. I'm sorry, that will be the number 2. So revelation, what is there? Revelation is revealed, not to hide, and it's clear here that it's given it by God to show. Another version says to declare. So God is basically through John expressing in times of danger what is his inner thoughts, his will, and certainly how God would handle the injustice in this context. But you may be wondering, why didn't in the book of Revelation, why God didn't speak clearly? Why he used symbols? This is a an interesting interpretation that I found. Um, you may disagree if you like, but I found it interesting and accurate to my understanding. So why did John write Revelation using symbolic language? So to properly understand the book of Revelation, it is essential to understand the context in which it was written. The Apostle John did not write Revelation from the comfort of a safe church environment, just like us right now. He had no discomfort when he was, writing this book. Now, Scripture clearly states in Revelation chapter 1, verse 9, I, John, was on the island called Patmos because of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. So John, in this context, he was exiled, monitored, and punished for his faith. living under an empire that actively persecuted Christians. In the first century, letters were physically transported. Yeah, they didn't have cell phones or websites. They physically need to write it down and people needed to carry. But there was something interesting. To my understanding, he was in jail. So how was able to write this book and make sure Christians receive this book? So here's the interesting part. So John did not write as a direct political. I'm sorry, that was my confusion. Okay. So the first century letters were physically transported and could be inspected by Roman authorities. For this reason, John did not write as a direct political commentator, but as a biblical prophet using symbolic language common in Old Testament prophetic literature. So the purpose of symbolism was not to confuse the church, but to protect her. A Roman soldier could read about beasts, dragons, and numbers without understanding that the message was a critic of imperial power. So first century Christians familiar with Old Testament clearly understood the message. For them, beasts represented oppressive systems, the dragon symbolized the deceiver, and the numbers pointed to exalted human power. So symbolism functioned as a pastoral language of hope and resistance. So John wrote this way to strengthen persecuted churches without exposing them to a greater danger. I would just imagine like um, being in jail, writing something, perhaps against the emperor at that time and giving it to a soldier. Can you take this for me? And after their review and they read a lot of symbols they didn't understand, and they say, okay, this means nothing to me, and then they hand it to the whoever people got use it, to make sure that churches receive this book. In other words, um, God, this is my the way I see it. God is able to fool the devil. He thinks he's smarter than us, but he's not. We who trust God, we who trust in His words, if we follow what God is saying, even sometimes we don't understand, we will be the winners. Satan will not. He may be thinking like, I'm going to be doing this, this, and this. I'm going to put pressure here and pressure there. And they're going to make them feel like there's no escape, there's no way out to whatever situation is. But God can use that same thing that the devil is doing and turn it into good. So that was just an explanation about why John is using a symbolic language. Now let's analyze a little bit what the first beast really means in this context. So Revelation 13 presents a beast that is rising from the sea. That's the first beast. The way it was understood in the first century, it represents political and military power when it becomes absolute. Rome demanded emperor worship and attempted to take God's place. Obviously, Christians they understood very well what Exodus 23 says. The God's commanded us, shall have not, you shall have not other gods before me. So the following it's very important in a terms of discernment of the first bits. Governments do exist because God permits those, but God does not endorse governments. We choose our governments. God doesn't endorse them. If you remember when Jesus Christ was before Pilate, Pilate said, I have all the power to kill you right now, to destroy you right now. What did Jesus say? You shouldn't have any power over me if my father didn't give it to you. What Jesus is saying is like, I have the power, he mentioned, call my angels and you will be defeated. Like this. I am more powerful than you, government. I am more powerful than you, emperor. I can get rid of you right away if I wanted, but you are not my priority. But in Book of Revelation, chapter 1, also is mentioned that there is going to be a day that those emperors, governments, who abuse their power, they will be accountable to God. Yes, God doesn't endorse government. God permits government, which is a different thing. We choose our governments. But all injustice coming from any source of power, they will be accountable with God. Especially if this power was used to persecute Christians in any way. In any way. I want to give an example right now about symbolism. I was just talking last night with my mother, my sister, actually Gabby, about this. We received an unexpected visit on December 31st. Gabby knows a person who actually lives in Pennsylvania. She's a Puerto Rican woman, but she's been visiting our country for 18 years in a row, bringing, like aids, like clothing and food and stuff from the United States to our country. God bless for what she's doing. But she told me this. The last time I went to Nicaragua, I think it was in October, if not mistaken, last year. She said, or November, she told me that the government there, the authorities there, confiscated her Bible. I heard news about my country right now about Bibles is no longer allowed in our country, like physical Bible. But I could hear right now from a witness that she told me I was confiscated and they didn't give it back. I think we were just assuming maybe they are aware that God used symbols and they've been thinking like paranoid, like what if there's some sort of groups using the Bible, with codes and symbols in a form of conspiration. That's how they think. And because they think this way, they found easy for them to punish and persecute believers. And that's something that happened here, but to the extreme in this context. So back to the first beast, the one that is rising from the sea. Again, it represents political, military power that becomes absolute. But in this context, also, um, we could read that there is also so the emperor or the government there, they attempted to take God's place. So two things God hates is abuse and idolatry, because God is jealous. He doesn't want us. He doesn't want anyone to stand up and think that they are above God. That will be punished by God. Okay. Now there is one institution that God has endorsed to represent Him directly, and that institution, I'm sorry, is the church. That's us, you and me. We are called to represent God, to represent His character, to represent His mercy, compassion, truth, and also holiness. Matthew 5:13, Jesus even called us, "You are the light of the world." See, we Christians, we have, believe it or not, we Christians, we have more power than a government. And you can think about how that could happen. We don't have weapons. Yes, we don't have physical weapons, but we have the Spirit of God. We have His words. We have His favor. and we are commanded to fight um, not against a specific government, but to fight by being the light of the world. So, in other words, the church is called to represent the Lamb. Now, there is a second beast that is mentioned in chapter 13, and the second beast rules through deception. And there also mention a number 666, which is the number of man that is interpreted as a humanity exalted. Um, here's what I found in my investigation about the number 666. So currently in language in Hebrew, there were two ways to call people by their names using letters or using numbers. You know, but maybe the name Philip in Hebrew could be number 9, something like that. According to my investigation, there's something I think is called geometria, and what that means is they assign number to a specific name. So the number 666, according to my investigation, um, it is translated as a Neron Caesar, which was the Roman emperor at that time. They used that number again because they didn't want to expose the church. That was going to be more dangerous. So protecting ourselves is also wise. Why? Because we are alive, we can do more for God's kingdom, we can do more for God's people. Obviously, apparently Romans they did not understand about numbers, but Christian they did. In this context, they were talking about specifically about this emperor, Neron, who considered himself and put a law that every person must recognize that Neron was a god. For instance, if someone in that time said or confess the Lord or Jesus is my Lord, you automatically became in a treason, and therefore you're gonna be targeted and punished in different ways to the extreme to the death. That's what they had to face. That was the context. Now, I also found, and this is very important, the number 666. So the number 6, just one number, number 6, it means in Hebrew imperfection and humanity. Okay? The number 7 is the opposite, that's perfection. But we are not yet there. The number 6 is imperfection and humanity. But the number 6 three times together, it means corruption to the fullest. That's what it means. And Christians at that time, they understood very well the meaning of all this symbolism that I'm just trying to explain right now, that is a little bit challenged. But it also reminds us the following. When it comes to the beast, number 2, which the purpose is to validate the beast number 1, and the beast number 2 is using deception. It's not only what in this context, yes, it's pointing out a specific government because they were the ones persecuting Christians, but there's something that is beyond that, which is basically it's a pattern, and that's what I wanted to explain. That's where we want to be mindful and aware. We can think this already happened 2,000 years ago, but there is a pattern that keep repeating over and over and over, and we must be mindful because Being a number six, in a sense, that's okay because we're not perfect. We're humans. God knows that. But 666 being extremely corrupt, that's another thing. That's not accepted by God. That will be punished by God in a due time. And it's important because this type of pattern, this type of system doesn't only apply to governments, it also applies to religious system. Have you ever wondered why Jesus treated some people in one way and other people with harshness? For example, Matthew 23, um, Jesus described in his using language that is very hard. Jesus being very hard towards religious leader in his time. And he's very clear to call them and make a list and description about how they did things and who they really were. Why? Because those leaders they also had power, they had influence, but they abuse. And I think that's my point. That's my point. So in Revelation chapter 13, the Bible says in the last verse, number 18, this call for wisdom, let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of men, that number is 666. So this call for wisdom, again, the book of Revelation is not to give us panic or fear, it's to give us peace, consolation, and also wisdom. When we read Revelations, let's not be fearful about this. Just let's be mindful. Let's remember also that there is a destiny for the beast and for the dragon, which is Satan. And those who practice corruptions and abuse to its fullest and don't repent, it's going to be an outcome. It's going to be accountable to God. We must be mindful as well that um, no matter what we're going through right now, political speaking, or the society we belong to, where we are right now, everything is temporary. Like the beast is a temporary thing. God will destroy it in His time. But we must be mindful that we are not part of this system. We're not part of the abuse. Anyone, and I really want to say this, anyone who has any sort of power, let's say at home, in our local congregations, in our society, governments, in our jobs, for college, whatever God has put us that we have influence and power, make sure do not abuse it. Make sure let's stay humble. That was very important for them to understand, to identify, um, for them in their context, that gave them hope and consolation that Neron and the system is going to fall down, that God is going to make them accountable, that their suffering it's not going to be forever, but they also were learning not to be part of the beast. And it's something that I hope you, again, it was very challenging for me, but I found it really, really necessary to remind us that no evil, even if we think like it's impossible that a system can change or improve. And as I told my family in Nicaragua, we can think like, oh, this government is so evil for things we have witnessed and experienced. And we sometimes think like things are not going to change. The Bible encourages us to trust God will take care of this. God will take care of the evil, will make them accountable, but also He will take care of us. He will protect us. He will give us peace. He will give us consolation. He will give us providence. And I want to thank you right now for your time. Thank you.